Welcome everybody to this episode of The Specifist. So I changed the YouTube channel name to The Specifist because it's what my podcast channel name is. And what I want to try and do is I want to release YouTube content that's the same as podcast content. So that like anybody who follows my podcast it doesn't get left behind, and those who only listen to my YouTube channel don't get left behind by podcasting stuff. I won't do it for everything YouTube related. I think I will do more personal content for both YouTube and podcasting. I think YouTube is going to be more practical stuff like, meditations and whatnot, and podcasting is going to be more about the theoretical underpinnings of my ideas and things like this. But today we're talking about laziness, because I think we all have grown up or have had this myth concerning laziness, saying that some people are just lazy, or, like if you're finding yourself not wanting to do anything, you can call yourself lazy and all this other stuff. But I want to basically debunk this idea of laziness. I'm not saying that people don't do nothing at times and whatnot, but I'm not. What I am saying is that it has nothing to do with laziness, but has more to do with, well, it depends on what the laziness is caused by, right? So it's all about motivation. Or sometimes it's conflicting desires, or sometimes it's about the thing that is missing from doing anything. So when I say that laziness is a myth, what I mean is that the idea that laziness is something that people can just kind of snap out of, or that laziness is something, that's caused by people who are just, like, there's this idea that this kind of like attitude that people can kind of have, where people are like, you're just too lazy, it's almost like an insult, and it's almost like a derogatory term sometimes, the way it's used, because people don't understand what causes laziness in people. So this might be a multi-segmented video. We'll see what happens there, but laziness has nothing to do with being laziness or being lazy, wanting to be lazy. Most people don't necessarily want to be lazy necessarily for the sake of laziness. There's usually some other reason for why this is happening. So I want to give you some examples of what this looks like. So you can see it in your own life, perhaps, and in areas where you may find yourself being lazy. So good example. Let's say you are apathetic about doing anything. Why would you be apathetic about doing something? Maybe you are a nihilist and you realize that there is very little point to doing anything because of the impermanence of things that you do. Everybody tells you that you should do what makes you happy, but then you realize that if that's true, happiness only lasts like a couple of minutes, a couple of hours at most. And so if that is true, let's say you do this thing, right? Giving you the reasoning behind why this laziness is happening. So let's say you do something to make yourself happy. How long would that last? A couple of minutes, couple of seconds, couple of hours at most? at most like a couple of days. But then what? That happiness fades, something annoys you, something gets on your nerves, and that happiness leaves for a time. And so then what? Then you go, oh man, I want that happiness to hit again. And so you do the thing again to get yourself happy. And then what happens then? Maybe you're happy for, a couple minutes again, a couple hours, a couple days, but then it repeats again. It repeats over and over and over and over again. And so you start realizing the pointlessness of making yourself happy by doing things that you like to do. Because you realize that happiness is not permanent. Happiness is a very fickle thing to want. And I might make a video more personally for YouTube, because I've talked about this on my podcast more in the past. But when it comes to wanting anything, or when it comes to happiness versus peace, I generally choose peace over happiness, because with peace, sure, it's impermanent like happiness, but with peace, it's not as fickle. You can create peace a lot easier than you can happiness. Most things that you look to for your happiness, it takes a lot more effort to do than it does to create peace. And so you realize the pointlessness of doing things because of impermanence. Maybe you do something, maybe you want to be remembered, but then you know that that's not going to last. Eventually you will be forgotten. Things like this, and so your actions don't really matter, things like this, right? And so maybe you do want to do something, but because you realize this ridiculousness and this pointlessness of doing anything, you don't do anything. You decide not to for various reasons. That's one cause for laziness. Another cause could be that you find comfort in familiar things, familiar settings. Maybe being in your room or whatever. And when you're out in the world, it's uncomfortable, and so you decide that comfort is more important than being and doing things that you might sometimes want to do, but you decide not to do for various reasons. So there's multiple reasons for why laziness happens in your life. And it's not about judging yourself. It's not about saying, oh, I'm so lazy, I'm so bad as a person, oh no, what do I do? It's about realizing and understanding what happens or what causes laziness. Maybe you can do something about it. Maybe you can say, okay, maybe this motivation is wrong for being lazy. Maybe I can change it. But the point is to recognize it, understand it. The thing that I've learned over the years is that the more understanding I can bring to a subject, a person, anything, when it comes to anybody or anything, the less judgment I have about this thing, because I understand more of why this is happening. Not always, but generally speaking, that tends to be true. And so this is what we're doing in this kind of situation, is bringing more understanding to the problem of laziness. And so what you can do is you can self-reflect. And if you are yourself lazy at times, find out why that is. Look at your emotions and your desires when this is happening, and find out what those emotions and desires are. Observe, right? Why do you get lazy at these certain times? Maybe it's because you're your mind is avoiding discomfort. A lot of psychologists say that life is about pleasure versus pain. The mind is trying to avoid pain and cause and create pleasure. But actually, it's actually a lot more simple than this. It's more about the mind is about avoiding discomfort. It doesn't really care about pleasure as much. I mean, it does. Don't get me wrong, but it's not the overwhelming part of it. It's mostly about avoiding discomfort. And so, if doing something is uncomfortable, more uncomfortable than not doing something, depending on your motivation, depending on your meaning in that situation and whatnot, the more your mind's not going to want to do that thing. Like, say, for instance, you have a job, you do work every day, whatever that is, or every weekday or whatever, right? And you hate your job. It's uncomfortable, it's annoying, it's 8 hours a day of strenuous, busy work, basically. At least that's what you tell yourself. And so you will then create an attitude within yourself saying, I don't want to work. This is annoying. Why is my life so horrible and miserable and all this other stuff? And so you may slack off on certain duties, certain work, because of this discomfort that's happening. So notice this. Become aware of the desire for comfort in this situation and the desire to avoid or move away from discomforting situations. And this applies to anything, not just laziness, but like anything, like relationships. Maybe you avoid relationships because you associate relationships with discomfort. Too much emotion could be discomforting for you, or whatever the case might be. Or maybe the thing is more about like it could be literally anything. It's not just about laziness. It could be about like certain emotions are discomforting, and so you judge and avoid them and you try and ignore them instead of becoming aware and dealing with that in that moment, kind of thing. Really, I don't even think it's about dealing with it. I think it's more about becoming aware of it. You can deal with it later if you want, but really the purpose is to become aware. Because becoming aware may sound very simple and not really going to do anything, but actually becoming aware of something is the first step. Without becoming aware of what you're so without becoming aware of something, you can't fix it, you can't understand it. But more than that, there's some kind of magical power of sorts surrounding becoming aware of something. I don't know exactly what it is, but if you just observe something without judging, without getting mad at it or whatever, you take the power away from this thing that you gave to it. Because and I dare you to try this one day, like a 5-minute meditation. I might do this as well as a video. But what you can do is you can sit by yourself, do like a little meditation, get comfortable, do whatever you do before you meditate. Maybe take some deep breaths, a couple of deep breaths, and become a little bit calmer, settle into the calmness within yourself. And then just observe your thoughts. And then if you find yourself judging your thoughts, notice that, observe that, and then return back to observing your thoughts. If you find yourself your mind wandering and you're not observing your thoughts anymore, notice that. Don't judge it, or if you do, notice that as well. And then return back to observing your thoughts. Doing that 5-10 minutes a day really is like amazing. It does amazing things to your mind. But anyways, if you are not aware of it, you can't fix it, you can't deal with it, you can't understand it. And understanding is the first step to acceptance, in my opinion. And in most cases, in many cases, depending on how strong your beliefs are, if they're anchor beliefs, which I'll talk about more of in other episodes, but if they're really strong beliefs about something, it will be harder to do that. But many times, that won't necessarily be the case. So how do you overcome laziness, right? How do you overcome this problem of laziness? So I'm not really sure what the answer is, but I think it's about understanding why laziness in your particular case is happening. What is causing it? What is causing you to become lazy in the first place? Once you figure that out, you can write down certain steps you can take to kind of overcome this desire or whatever. In some way, whatever that is, you can make steps to take to deal with the basically I think that the goal is to write down different ways of dealing with it. Maybe your reason for being lazy is fear of going out and exploring the world because it's too uncomfortable or whatever. And so what you do is you start small, or what you can do is you can write down multiple ways of dealing with this. Observing, start small. Just write down a bunch of reasons. Write down a bunch of things you can do to kind of slowly, because it will take a lot of time. Because a lot of these habits are habits. A lot of times these habits have been building over time, and so it won't happen overnight. You will not overcome these habits of mind and emotion overnight. It may take years to overcome the word I'm looking for here. It may take years to overcome the habit that you created. That's not really the right word I was looking for, but and it's not about really even overcoming it, in my opinion. I mean, that can be important, but really I think it's more about realizing what this is doing. And I'll be talking more about this in a future video, because I've talked about this on a podcast already. But one of the 5 remembrances, which is, I think, really important, a really important remembrance. This is from Buddhism, which states that the actions that I take are the ground upon which I stand, and each action has a consequence. I mean, I'm paraphrasing here, but that's basically what it is. And so in this case, you can notice the consequence of this particular desire, this particular inclination within yourself, this particular inclination to or reason to not do anything, or to not get involved in relationships, or whatever it is that you're prepared not to do, or that you are doing that is self-destructive or whatever. Because really that's the important part. If you can't see how this action is causing you problems, in a non-judgmental way, you can't fix it. You can't deal with it. You can't understand what's happening. You can't really understand the many facets of this particular inclination of yours, this particular habit. And so you fail to realize what's happening. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed this episode of this video on the specifist, and I will talk to you in the next one, whenever that's going to be. And I'll talk to you in the next one. I don't know. I want to try and do more videos on this YouTube channel. As far as the podcast is concerned, I will probably be backing off a little bit. What I want to try and do, actually, with the podcast is do more weekly episodes rather than daily episodes, where I will be whether I will be talking about one topic or a multitude of topics, I don't really know. But what I want to try and do is do weekly episodes on this podcast, and basically just recording segments throughout the week, and at the end of the week, release the episode in whatever form it is in, depending on if it's fully finished or not. But with the YouTube videos, the YouTube channel, I want to try and do more videos. I don't know how many videos I want to do a week, but I want to try and do at least one or two or three a week. Because I do think that the videos, if they're like done in really good ways, can work and help people and whatnot. And the podcast we can get really deep down into the foundations of what is happening and stuff like this. So anyways, hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll talk to you in the next one.